Hello, everyone. We are here. We're back. We are going to discuss the penultimate episode of season 2 of The Mandalorian, chapter 15, The Believer. And Christian, I don't know about you, but I am certainly a believer after this episode. But I'm I'm Rachel Radner, and I'm here with Christian Blatt tonight to talk about the episode.
Yes, well, to quote the great Davy Jones, Mike Nesmith, and Peter Tork, well, I saw his face and now I'm a believer. Didn't even know I had that until you said it. So, yeah, I thought, it's funny because I was thinking about this episode. The last two episodes were so crazy with the things they gave us that, even though, we knew Ahsoka was going to be on a few weeks ago, it's still just the way they delivered. And it's like, this is a great episode with a lot of really cool stuff in it, but it didn't have any of those moments where you were, where you're like, oh, I'm so glad that didn't get spoiled for me. So it, like, comparatively, it's like, oh, it's just kind of a normal episode, but I thought it was great. I loved seeing Bill Burr again. I thought that we really got to dive into his character some more. I mean, I think he got more layered for me, his character, than he was in his season 1 episode.
Yeah, I went back and I went to season 1. I watched The Prisoner, which is the episode that features Bill Burr. I rewatched it too because I've rewatched it a couple of times actually because it's felt for like the things that have been coming up.
Sure, yeah.
Episode, but yeah, I rewatched The Prisoner in particular twice this year as we've been getting season 2 episodes, and when I went back to rewatch it this time, I compared it to what we got from Bill Burr, or from what we got from Miggs Mayfield. And it, to me, watching them back to back, the growth that we see from Miggs is completely I really can see him and appreciate him a lot more than I did when I first saw him, because season 1, he's with this group of thugs, for lack of a better word, and they're really you don't want to like them. They're not presented in a way that you are going to like them. They are layered, yes, but they're just not they're the not so bad guys that that are going to betray Din.
Yeah, like that episode, I kind of thought of them as the less than magnificent 7. They assembled this crack team for a specific caper, but they were all terrible people. But as it turns out, Mayfield was probably the least terrible of a lot of them,
Well, and actually, this episode, what I really love is that you see that there are different layers of bad. And Miggs, to me, by the end of this episode, he seemed like one of the good guys. And what I loved, so I was a history major, and one of the books that we read was Ordinary Men by Christopher Browning. And the concept was, if you are a soldier during Nazi-era Germany, are you guilty of the same crimes? How guilty are you for committing these atrocities? Right. Especially if you're just a general soldier who either was conscripted into the army or you really just had no choice for whatever reason. And it felt very much like I felt so many similar themes from that book with this episode through Miggs Mayfield's eyes, because essentially when we learn about Operation Cinder, which is a huge, that is already canon. If anyone listening to this is not familiar with Operation Cinder, something you might want to look up because it's very fascinating. And essentially what that is, for anyone who doesn't know, it was what Palpatine had set up in the event that he was killed or that the Empire lost. It was the operations to kind of keep the Empire sort of kind of winning and destroying either cities or planets sometimes, and just so that they could kind of keep going even if he was gone. And essentially what we learned in Tross is that all along he was planning to take over another host to come back. But
right, sure.
I digress. What I loved was Miggs's character in particular. I loved the conversation that he ended up having near the end, when we get when we ended up getting to the ending where he's speaking about what it was like being in his division. I felt like not just with him, but the stormtroopers in general, this episode, it wasn't saying that they weren't bad, but it kind of humanized a lot of them. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, he says it a couple times in the episode. So Mayfield says we all got to be able to sleep at night, and in that situation, he's just like, I know what we're in the middle of right here, but I can't just walk away from this guy who doesn't have any remorse for what he did, his role in all of these, great men that I served with. And it's his fault that they died. And, I think he holds back as long as he could. Maybe he's looking for a way out, and he's like, look, I just got to shoot this guy. And I think, Mando definitely doesn't want, Din definitely doesn't want him to, but he also, I think, really understood. He's like, look, that, you're really jeopardizing this mission that we have, but he also understands that it's kind of a principled moment for him,
Yeah. And, it's interesting because you have guys like Valen Hess, who is the Imperial officer. You have, and by the way, if anyone did not recognize him, he's from Game of Thrones, that actor. So, shout out to him. But so Valen Hess, like, obviously there are people like him who are just downright evil, and like there's no, like, I don't care like what backstory this person had, it's going to be hard to redeem someone like that, who just clearly, like, even though they have a point of view and they're trying to say, well, from the Empire's perspective, we needed to kill those people at Burnin Khan, which was like the big conversation piece they were having here, and what happened there under Operation Cinder. And so, like, you have this guy who he just really has no remorse for, one, the people on his side who were lost, but also he does nothing, like, he doesn't care at all that lives were lost. So you have people like him, and then you have people like Miggs, who at one point were on the side of the Empire for whatever reason. We don't quite know with Miggs because we don't know enough of his backstory. But yeah, you have people like Miggs who are just ordinary people who got roped in to one side or the other for whatever specific, we don't know the specifics, but there's always a reason why an ordinary person would join one side or the other. And Miggs makes a very interesting point when they're in the Juggernaut cargo transport, and they're going with the Rhydonium and they're heading toward the refinery. Miggs makes the excellent point of, like, the people they're watching, it doesn't matter whether it's Empire or New Republic, they're being controlled by someone. What do you think of all of that?
Well, as you're talking, it made me think about a couple of things. First is, the Empire is just the rule of law throughout the galaxy. Not at this point in history. We're sort of talking back, post Revenge of the Sith. And I mean, if anybody who remembers, in A New Hope, Luke keeps talking about how he wants to go to the Academy. Well, what's that Academy? He wants to fly for the Empire, because that is like joining the army. And it does feed right into what you're saying. It's like, if you were in Germany in the late 30s and early 40s, that's who was in charge. So that's who you were serving. Yeah. And, it really is, it's a question of how responsible are you for the greater actions, when it's just, there's obviously as it relates to Nazi Germany, we were just following orders, but at some point, that those orders are wrong. Yeah. And you still follow through with them anyway. And so, the rebellion is just that. It's just this crazy group of people who are fighting for what they believe is right, but it's not the rule of law. It's like protesters essentially. And it's, so do you want to serve the military? So I think that's probably, what Mayfield probably was in a situation like a lot of people are around our world, where it's like, well, if I serve in the military, I'll get some money, maybe I'll be able to go to university after, that sort of a thing. So he probably just found himself as like, well, yeah, that's a solution, is to go serve in the military. It happens to be the Empire. And
Mhm.
I think sometimes people realize, that it's a lot different. It's Nazi Germany, it's Imperial Japan. It's just a different way of looking at things. So I think that, yeah, there's a lot to think about in terms of this. It's like, obviously, Mayfield, when we see him at the beginning of the episode, he's in prison for a reason. We saw the reason. But it's also just serving for the Empire doesn't necessarily mean like we should automatically have to go to prison. Now, these people who continue to serve the Empire, the New Republic grows, that's very different. That's when you're like, no, 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 this was a way better way. The Moff Gideons of the world. I think that it definitely has the juxtaposition of that. And just my final point on this is, I think that they played around with our expectations and our perception really well, because this is one of the only times where a fleet of TIE fighters come in and you're like, oh, good, the cavalry, they're saving them.
It was excellent how they did that. I am just like, just to emphasize your point there, because the thing is, I've never and Miggs even makes this comment about what we're all thinking. Never thought you'd root for the stormtroopers before the Empire, and it's like we were. But the thing is that if you boil it down to, if you take off the stormtrooper outfits and you take away what these people stand for, at the end of the day, they're just regular people, like not the Moff Gideons, not the officers. They're a little bit different, but the average soldier, the one who, all those people, I didn't see any women, so I'll just say men, all those men who were standing around high-fiving each other and just really like celebrating and just, being comrades and being part of the same team and group and just like being there for each other. It was brilliant the way that they showed that, the way that they kind of represented that, okay, like if you strip everything else away, these are regular people. They're happy. They saved one of their own. These are not evil people. And as we see so often in Star Wars, usually the stormtroopers at the lower levels aren't. Like even people like Finn, if we're going into the sequel trilogy, he was, eventually, like when we get to the sequel trilogy, a little bit different. They are kind of saying that children were taken. Well, they're not kind of, they definitely were saying that kids were taken from their homes and kind of forced into this lifestyle. We know from Rebels that, if we go back to the time period, during the Empire, we know, and that during Rebels, they were taking kids and training them. So sometimes people really just did not know any other lifestyle. And it's hard to not like empathize in that moment with stormtroopers when you see that they're people just like us, and just like, seeing a celebration on the New Republic side, like it felt very similar, just with a different type of uniform. So, and also I wanted to give a shout out to the man who directed this episode, Rick Famuyiwa, and I am kind of sorry if I mispronounce his name. I'm pretty sure I said that right, but he actually was. I found this interesting. He played Jib Dodger in The Prisoner. So back in season 1, he was an actor. He's directed plenty of films, though.
Sure,
but,
yeah.
I just found it very interesting that this would be the episode he would direct when he was an actor in The Prisoner, which obviously had a lot to do with Miggs Mayfield. Crew. I just really felt like this episode, obviously the big, huge moment is that moment we get between Miggs and Din, where Din has to take off his helmet, because if he doesn't, the terminal that he has to access to get the coordinates for the ship from Moff Gideon, like he obviously it's going to need to scan his face. Perfect plot element for us to have to, for Din of all people to have to be the one to take off his helmet. They worked it out very well that he would have to be the one.
Yeah, and I think that they, from a storytelling standpoint, did it in a great way, where he makes the initial concession of, I'm going to wear a different helmet. you're not going to see who I am. So he's already taken off the helmet. He's already made that. And it just shows the importance of getting Grogu back for him that, and then he's just like, look, I'm in a situation where none of this, this is all for nothing if I don't take off my helmet and show my face in public. And I thought it was a very cool reveal. Now I do have a little nitpicky thing, which is he has a well manicured mustache, and I'm like, well, then how much does he leave this helmet on if he's taking the time to do that? I know he has to eat. He probably doesn't sleep in it all the time, but I think he does a lot. And I'm like, he's trimming that mustache. So does he get up in the helmet? No, I don't think so. So it just, and I'm sort of bringing it up in a funny way, but it made me think it's like he takes this thing off more than we think. I mean, obviously to eat, but so I thought it was a really nice moment too, late in the episode when Mig says to him, like, nah, I didn't see anything, just, you did what you had to do, he's just like, you haven't turned your back on your beliefs. You did this because you had to. And I think already from earlier in the season, speaking to Bo-Katan and the other Mandalorian, or, I mean, I don't know, they were all Mandalorians, but they all had the armor. And the fact that we have Boba Fett, who also doesn't, he takes his helmet off all the time. So I think he's starting to maybe question whether or not this is actually the way. But I thought that, it happens so rarely that it's like, oh my God, he took his helmet off. You can't help but be excited when we actually get to see Pedro Pascal,
Well, yeah, especially, the fact that this is such a big deal. We've only seen this twice. I mean, we all know him. We all know his face from Game of Thrones, which is so funny to me because I constantly hear his accent from Game of Thrones, which I'm assuming is probably closer to his real, like, natural voice.
Right.
But I always hear that compared to what we get. And because in season 1, if I don't think he actually had any lines with the helmet off. I don't think he said anything to Grogu.
I don't think he did. Yeah, I think you're right.
Had it off. So we knew it was his voice, but part of me, because we had never seen him speak with the helmet off, and because I'm so used to how he talks in Game of Thrones, I just expected, I almost wondered what his voice was going to really sound like when he took the helmet off and started speaking. So I was most excited for that. I loved that moment we got between Migs and Din, and, really, like, the question that is kind of staying in the back of my mind, though, and I wanted to get your perspective on this. Migs had a line where he said, there's a difference between saying you're never going to take your helmet off, as in the armor that you're wearing, and being willing to take it off in place of like a stormtrooper helmet. What did you personally make of what Migs said to him in that moment?
Yeah, I think that, it started off from a place where he's trying to, he's definitely pushing his buttons. He's trying to get him riled up, but he's also just asking sort of like real questions of like, so where's the line? We all have to have a line. He says that. And it's like, so what is it with you and the helmet? First, it was you could never take it off. Now it's you can take it off when you have to. And then, it kind of really sets us up for him understanding the severity of the fact that he takes it off. He has a drink with that Imperial officer. And I don't know. I mean, this is why I think that we got some I thought we got some really nice acting from Bill Burr in this, because the character, I don't know, he just got, Migs got so much deeper really throughout the episode, but just that moment that scene sitting at the table, the three of them sitting at the table, is really where we got so much, because it's like this Mandalorian is sitting here with his helmet off, like, had to happen to get us to this situation, and I don't know. I mean, I think that his realization of the gravity of the situation,
And here's the thing is that, speaking to that line, now that Din has taken it off, yes, like, he probably won't see as far as he understands, the chances of him seeing Miggs again are probably slim. If he ever sees him again. And then everyone else who saw Din without his mask is probably dead. So,
That's a great point.
Does that mean that Din, does that mean, like, what's going through my mind is Din technically betrayed the rules of how he views the Mandalorian should be, with never taking their helmet off. We know he did it with Grogu, but at least, like, the way that I kind of saw that is maybe it was an exception because Grogu is a child, and maybe he figured, okay, well, he'll never, like, this is a little bit different. He probably won't, like, remember this moment, maybe. But now that Din's taken his helmet off in front of people who are going to remember at least one person who's alive, even if the rest of them are dead, which you never know. There could have been survivors who saw him.
Yeah.
But the point is that now that he's done this, I'm wondering if Din's going to kind of like end up going toward a place where he realizes that he's broken what he believed to be his like religion. And now, since he's broken it, if he's going to start to stray from the more from some of the stricter rules that he's followed most of his life.
Yeah, or another way to put it, Daniel Drew says that, I mean, he knows he's part of a crazy cult. And that's sort of what Bo-Katan's trying to get him to understand in that earlier episode is, it's sort of like, okay, well, you're Orthodox Mandalorian, we're Reformed Mandalorian, and we don't really do that. But I mean, if that's your thing, and I think that a lot of what happens for Din is internal because we don't see his face. And I think internally, he's really, when he's had the time, he's really thought a lot about all of this, and he doesn't really know. And I think it's something that we'll explore more in season 3 for sure. But it's they've definitely done enough background on the character that we know that, yes, we saw it in season 1 there, but he had the injuries, he needed to be healed. There were really extenuating circumstances. This is a little different, but he did it for a greater good, so I think that this episode might not have had the flashy surprises as the last 2 weeks, but I thought that this was a great, like, just really deep episode, and it just gives you a lot to think about and just some tremendous character work. And might I add that nothing made me more. I was not excited for anything more in the episode when I saw that Boba Fett took the time to polish his armor. I was like, oh, thank God.
Speaking of Boba Fett, though, what I wanted to mention was, I mean, there were a bunch of Easter eggs in this episode, but specifically when he released the seismic bombs or sometimes they refer to them as the seismic charges. This was something that we saw in Attack of the Clones with Jango Fett. And so it was definitely a callback to that. When basically this was something that Jango Fett used against Obi-Wan's starfighter. So it's something that they directly called back, except obviously in this particular situation, we were glad that those TIE fighters
Yeah. Look, some families pass down, their wedding china for generations. Others have seismic charges or seismic bombs. And it was pretty cool to see. I mean, even if you'd never seen them before, it was still like a great trick. But then the fact that it's also a callback on top of that is it's a really nice touch. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just to kind of address a couple more too before we move on and talk about the big news, which are all the shows and movies that were announced at Investor Day. I don't know about you guys, but I was watching live. Christian, you were too, right?
I was watching Twitter because I couldn't watch the stream, but I kept just watching everything pop up. And I was exhausted at the end of it. And then they did all the Marvel stuff. And if you weren't watching earlier today, everyone out in the audience, I wasn't planning on doing another Marvel movie talk today, but there was so much to talk about. We did do an episode today. It was myself, Zach Wilson, Jeff Williams Jr., and my friend Eric Connor, who teaches over at the New York Film Academy. And we went a little bit over an hour, but we needed 3 because there was so much Marvel stuff to talk about.
Yes.
But
Marvel.
I had already been bludgeoned by all the crazy Star Wars news.
Yeah.
It was like, no, stop. I can't. No mas, no mas. So yeah,
I
but go ahead. Sorry.
I was watching live. I didn't expect like, like I was working and watching at the same time. And I'm like, I'm not like, I'll probably turn this on and then just kind of listen to it in the background. I was more invested than I expected I would be. And I obviously was really excited about Star Wars and Marvel, but I ended up basically paying attention to the full 4 hours of this presentation, even during moments where they weren't really announcing too much.
No, but then the funny thing is, like, this stuff is so huge, the Star Wars and Marvel, and what gets lost in there. And yeah, no, I mean, it doesn't necessarily appeal to the same audience, but it's like, oh yeah, there's also like a Moana show, a Princess Tiana show,
Yeah.
show, and you're like, what are they doing? You know?
And they're doing a live action Little Mermaid, which they've tried before in the past, and it just, this time it feels like they're doing it in a better way. But
right.
Yeah. I was going to mention some of the Easter eggs, but I think it's more important that we just move on and talk about all of this because we had so much with what they announced. I'm going to start with Ahsoka because we were all kind of expecting there was going to be a spinoff. I had no idea that it was literally going to be Ahsoka with her own show. Did you think that was going to happen, Christian?
No, I thought she would have been part of something, and I don't quite know what that would have been. Look, I didn't think it was impossible, but yeah, I figured that, okay, there'll be a show that she's on. And instead it's like, oh yeah. And look, you cast Rosario Dawson because you're going to do something big with the character. But no, I wasn't counting on, her actually getting her own series. But it was definitely a nice revelation, to get that for sure.
Well, what's interesting, so we got Ahsoka, we got Rangers of the New Republic, which is supposed to kind of be working alongside that same time period, and like they're going to basically work in tandem. I assume she would be on a show like that, which I'm guessing Rangers of the New Republic will probably see more Bo-Katan. My guess would be that obviously we'll see Ahsoka on Rangers of the New Republic.
Yeah.
My other guess, now that we know that we're getting an Obi-Wan, like we knew we were getting an Obi-Wan Kenobi show, but the big news is that they dropped that Hayden Christensen will be back. They did not specify Darth Vader, but Kathleen Kennedy said this will be the rematch of the century, which makes us think, yes, it will be Darth Vader. It makes me think, though, that Hayden Christensen, while he's going to come back on Obi-Wan as Darth Vader, potentially, maybe flashbacks too, it almost seems to open the doors so that if they were going to bring him back as a Force ghost in something like Rangers of the New Republic or even the Ahsoka Tano, Ahsoka show, they could bring him back either as a flashback or they could bring him back as a Force ghost too. So I'm really hoping that they go in that direction with it and that we see a Hayden Christensen crossover. Because I just, I'm curious though, like not to kind of, I'm curious having him back as Darth Vader, what we're going to are we
going to get him in the suit? Because it almost seems like that's a waste, because obviously, David Prowse literally just passed away within the last 2 weeks. He was too old. It wasn't going to be him. That's not the point, but it's just, who is it going to be? Is it still going to be James Earl Jones? You would assume it would be. So if he's there as Darth Vader, is it something where, we're seeing him? I think that what that show is going to be 10 years after Revenge of the Sith. So
10 years,
yeah. So how far gone is he? We see him with his mask off briefly in Empire, but also in Return of the Jedi. And, obviously his body deteriorates over that time. So is it going to be a little bit more like Kylo Ren when he takes the helmet off? He obviously needs it to breathe, whereas Kylo Ren didn't. But are we going to see his face under there? And is that really when we see him? I think you're right. We'll get some flashbacks. We'll get some Force Ghost stuff. I think it's interesting. But I just was surprised because the social media, the internet, apparently liked Hayden Christensen a lot more than I remembered they did. Just the way that people talk about the way that people talk about the prequels. We've said this on this show before. Everybody pretty much agrees Ewan McGregor's fantastic.
Mhm.
A lot of the criticism of the prequels, first, unfortunately, poor little Jake Lloyd for Phantom Menace, but
Sad.
also, I mean, for Hayden Christensen. I mean,
Well,
the
I've always heard that it wasn't Hayden, because here's the thing: I've seen him in other films,
yeah,
and he is a good actor. I even thought he played a good Anakin. But what I've always heard is that he just kind of butted heads with George Lucas, who was not the best at directing actors. And so that's where I've heard that's, when he was in this role as Anakin, it never pulled out his best performance because of that. That's what I've heard from other people who are critical of his performance. But for me personally, I always thought he played a really good Anakin. And I mean, the problem is he's supposed to. If you look at Attack of the Clones, he's supposed to be a bratty, not teen, because he's
whatever, he's like in his 20s, or I don't think.
Yeah, I think he might be 19-ish.
Yeah, it's not by accident. He's about the age Luke is when we meet him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the sweet spot they put him in. Yeah.
And the thing is that he acted given his circumstances, given the fact that he was raised as a Jedi and that they're taught not to have attachments. To me, his emotional maturity, it made sense, because how is someone who is kind of told to restrain and to hold back, how are they really going to be able to have the depth that someone who's always someone who's had relationships where you can actually attach and grow and nurture those relationships, someone who has had those experiences is going to act differently. So to me, I thought the performance made sense. And then when you get to Revenge of the Sith, the darkness that we see, I thought was really powerful.
Yeah, and to your point, a lot of the problem for me and why Attack of the Clones on the whole is it's just a no-go for a full watch for me. Sequences filmed in Lake Como where Padme and Anakin are supposed to be falling in love. Natalie Portman is an exceptional actress.
She is.
George Lucas managed to make her come off terrible. I think that I think that Hayden Christensen did the best he could with just the awful, just painful, terrible dialogue that was written for him in those scenes. But it wasn't good. It doesn't matter. You could switch those two out with anyone, and it's still going to be bad scenes. And it's so yeah. I think that we've talked about George Lucas as a director, and there's a reason he didn't direct Empire. He didn't direct Return of the Jedi.
He didn't.
Carrie Fisher was always very outspoken about what a terrible director he was.
And she was also a script doctor. Yeah. And she, there are so many examples of her tweaking his scripts and tweaking, what he was tweaking scripts in general. But with him, she was very, she was very critical of some of the things that were happening. And I remember hearing that just in general, George Lucas, even on a lot of the documentaries, he's not the easiest person, from what the documentaries claim. He's not the easiest person to work with. Like you said, he did not direct the originals. He was the creator, but we didn't have him writing or directing.
Yeah, no, Lawrence Kasdan wrote Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. So, but look, so the Obi-Wan show is still what we're gonna get. That's still what's exciting about it, because I love Ewan McGregor, and I'm interested in seeing him again as Obi-Wan. Hayden Christensen being in it is an interesting wrinkle. It's like a new spin on it. I'm gonna bet that he's not in every episode. But if he is, it could even be, flashbacks are sort of in the way where somebody has like a conversation with, sort of like an embodiment of someone that's not in their life anymore, sort of like talking things out. I think it'll be interesting to see how they do it. But yeah, I mean, I think it's still the Obi-Wan show. Obi-Wan is certainly somebody that we feel deserves his own, platform. But how much Anakin we get in it? And look, once Anakin's going to be in it, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, if Hayden Christensen will do it, then why not?
Yeah, and the thing is that at this point in time, Obi-Wan, like, they always explain how quickly he aged, going back to the fact that he spent this time basically closing himself off and protecting Luke so that Vader would never find him. And that's really what took a toll on his physical health and mental health too. But, what I've seen them do in the past with Legends, the book that I'm thinking of is actually a Legends book now, even though it came out in 2013. But it's called Kenobi, and essentially you see how Obi-Wan goes from the Obi-Wan we knew from the prequels to the wizard on Tatooine, and you kind of see like that journey and how he changes. But my guess is that when we do see Hayden, number one, I think that his performance is just going to be amazing and incredible. And I think that having Deborah Chow as the director, I think it's going to make a huge difference in what we see from him. And I'm excited because I already know this is going to be amazing. And no matter how much we get him, there's so much they can do with it. It could be flashbacks. It could be Darth Vader having flashbacks.
That's a great point. Yeah.
But I don't know, in terms of Darth Vader and Obi-Wan, like, as far as I know, correct me if you know of anything, I don't know of a time where Obi-Wan and Darth Vader out before A New Hope where they had another interaction that's canon.
The way that it's set up, they haven't seen, I mean, I think that if you go back to like 2005, I think that George's stance was this is the last time they see each other until A New Hope. Yeah. And there are some things that you feel are going to get a little bit contradicted. When he says to Luke, like, Obi-Wan Kenobi, I'm just old Ben. I haven't heard that in a long time, So
also, I'm just thinking, like, Darth Vader, when he does see Obi-Wan in A New Hope, his line, it's been, like, he expresses how long it's been. So if Obi-Wan and Darth Vader have a duel that we don't know about that happened in that, intermittent period.
Yeah.
To me, it will ruin the moment we get in A New Hope.
Yeah. But what I'll say is if it's a really cool fight scene, I'll shrug it off and be like, oh, that's unfortunate, but man, was it cool,
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I won't complain either. Just,
No, but I mean, it's like, look, it's been cemented in that way for 43 years, so why are we undoing it now? So yeah, I think that they'll tread lightly with regards to that. They'll figure out a way to give us something that that we'll be impressed by, but they might have to bend the rules a little bit.
Yeah, and speaking of bending the rules, we're getting a series. We knew about this already. It's called Andor. So Diego Luna is reprising his role as Cassian Andor from Rogue One. We all know, and they hint, this is a spoiler. So if you have not seen Rogue One, just
what are you doing if you haven't seen Rogue One? Although there's somebody in the chat I'm sure hasn't seen Rogue One, but
well, if you don't want spoilers, just for like 2 seconds, plug your ears or something.
Just do a little la 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 la.
Give me 2, because what I'm going to say is that we know that Cassian Andor dies along with Jyn Erso in one of the biggest, like, that whole, like, in A New Hope when we get the scroll and, like, we see that there was a team that sacrificed so much. Well, that was the team. So with Andor, like, from what we already kind of knew, it was going to be a prequel series. And Diego Luna, we knew that he was filming with his friends because he had done a couple of interviews where that's how he positioned it. And when he was asked, "Oh, your friends, do they happen to be Lucasfilm?" And Diego Luna was like, "Why, yes, they are my friends." And so we knew what he was doing in London, and that he was there starting, to film for Andor. What do you think? Like, we did get a flashback in the preview they showed us where we see an interaction he has with Jin. What do you think we're going to get with this series, Christian?
I think it's, I mean, we've heard about this for kind of a while, that this is something that they wanted to do. And I've just, look, I really thought that Rogue One was very well done. And there is a lot that we could see, sort of like there's more to be done with these characters. Obviously, they all have to be prequels. So, I mean, we can kind of see anything, I mean, because it is going to, it depends on exactly when they set it in terms of how far before Rogue One, but you're in the period where the Empire's been around for 20, 25 years at this point. I mean, they've been in charge for that long. And you're at the point where the cracks are starting to get big enough that the rebellion's able to make a difference. So I think that to just sort of dive into that specific point in the history, because with Mando we're dealing with the post Empire, the fall of the Empire, the the little bits of the embers, as it were, that'll become the First Order. But I think that getting to spend more time in this very specific era, I welcome it, because there's so many stories that can be told there. And I did think he was great. I mean, he's a tremendous actor, and to kind of see the character again. So yeah, I think that this is one of those ones. It's sort of like The Mandalorian being a show, and it's like, well, yeah, okay, but you know what that kind of looks like, but you don't really know what the show is. So it can be anything. So I'm excited for just the amount of possibilities there are with that. Like what I'm saying is, you have a better idea of what the Obi-Wan show is going to be versus this show.
Yeah. And I think with this one, it's interesting because we have Rebels, which I feel like Rebels kind of takes us up to where we might be going in terms of timeline with Andor, because I get the sense, especially because they mentioned that Genevieve O'Reilly is going to be Mon Mothma. So we know that if Mon Mothma's involved, this is definitely, we're dealing with Rebels, and we're dealing with probably leading up to, maybe leading up to Cassian's involvement with them. And I'm guessing we're going to get some childhood backstory as well with him, because we didn't really, we got a lot of Jin's childhood, because it really was like Rogue One was really told from her point of view.
I mean, it's her story. Obviously, it's part of a bigger moment in terms of, leading into A New Hope. But yeah, this is her perspective. This is her story. Yeah.
Yeah. And we also know, like with Jin, I mean, not to talk too much about her, but she from the books, that are also, they are definitely canon books, but there's a couple of books that are out about her story, and there's so much more than what we got in Rogue One. So what I'm hoping is that since we're getting Andor as a television show, that they will have more of an opportunity to give us the things that you can't fit into, a movie that, you just kind of have to skip over a lot of things. So we have Andor, which is set during probably right after Rebels is my guess.
Yeah, that's a good point for it to be. Yeah.
Then Bad Batch, we're going back further, not, right after the Clone Wars. And Bad Batch we had known about. Bad Batch is, for anyone who didn't hear this, it's another animated series. They actually appeared in the last season of the Clone Wars series. And they were in for a couple of episodes. Really interesting episodes, interesting characters. I'm wondering if they had the chip in their brains, because they were seen as defects. So when Operation 66 was called, there's a possibility that they never turned. But I was trying to figure it out from the trailer.
Yeah, no, and I think that this is one of those things that it's nice when you're able to do this. It's like, the characters that have been introduced somewhere. Cassian Andor is another example. Like, hey, would you like to spend more time with this and really dive into it? And it's the sort of thing that maybe your more casual fan wouldn't think about. But I like that it's like, yeah, we got some live action, we've got some animation. I like that there's the mixture. In all honesty.
And then I'm looking off my list here. So the
Yeah,
one that
sure.
I'm very excited about, the Acolyte. We know, like, speaking about not knowing much about what you're going to get. All we get from this is that it's a mystery thriller that is basically going to deal with the dark side powers during the
Yeah.
final days of the High Republic. I am very excited. Like, we know we're getting a High Republic book in January, and like that seemed to be where some of the direction would be. Like when we heard about Ryan Johnson, when we heard that he was going to have a trilogy,
Right. Yeah.
rumors were that it was going to be High Republic, and we're getting a book, and so now like the Acolyte, I feel like that's another direction where like we have all this uncharted territory. I'm really excited to see what they do with that.
Yeah, no, I mean it's and I mean there's God, they go back 25 or more years, just some Dark Horse comics that they had it was a series called Tales of the Jedi, which would deal with sort of that period of so far back before the prequels and all of that. And there's just so many stories to tell, some of which could incorporate elements from things that are extended universe now, but also just completely new characters. I mean, you have a very large blank canvas in the Star Wars universe, but you're not really beholden to anything. So that's always exciting when you can kind of tell any sort of story that you want. And yeah, we really don't know what that's going to be like. And I don't know if we have a good sense for when we're going to get that show, because I think that they probably don't know that much about it yet.
Yeah. I mean, because we know that it's Leslie Headland who did Russian Doll. So at least we have a name
Right.
attached to the project. There's two. I mean, we'll get to the movies in a second. Well, we have a couple other shows to mention too, but we're also getting a Lando show.
Yeah.
Star Wars Visions, which is going to be, I'm so excited for this one. It's going to be Star Wars through the lens of Japanese animators. So it's going to be like, honestly, it feels like we're getting, I mean, it feels like we're definitely getting Star Wars anime, because these are Japanese creators who are going to be animating it. So that, like, I love anime. I am just, that was I didn't even expect this. And it just feels like with Star Wars Visions, we're going to get these like beautiful, I'm sure it's going to be plot driven stories, but even more like, I feel like we're going to get some amazingly like beautiful visuals in these, drawn animated, like little vignettes that we're getting.
Yeah, and again, this is sort of like it's another medium. It's going to be animation. It's going to be anime style. It's great because you'll get little breaks from what we're getting in terms of the Star Wars content. We were talking about this earlier today with the Marvel shows, that there's going to be this animated What If show kind of in the middle of next year, and it'll be probably like, oh, cool, we're getting new content, but you know what? It's different. And yeah, I think different will be welcome after once these shows start to kind of stack on top of each other, and go from one ends and the next one starts and all that. I think that it'll be cool to have stuff like this. And I don't want to make assumptions because I didn't read careful enough. Is Donald Glover going to be Lando in the Lando series, or has that not been officially announced?
That has not been officially announced.
So it could also be Billy D. Could be older Lando, but
I'm wondering if it is going to be Billy D. And the reason I say that is because in Tross, they opened up a big plot line with Jannah so first of all, if anyone hasn't read the novelization of Tross, Lando actually directly says, I had a daughter, the First Order took her from me.
Yeah.
And so it's very heavily implied that Jannah is his daughter. And so they kind of, one of the things they ended on in Tross was, let's go find, like Lando saying to Janna, let's go find out who you are.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure they were trying to hint that they were connected. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that's where they're going with this. And maybe it's not Billy D, but
and Daniel's saying the rumors are that it's both Billy and Donald, and you could kind of tell different parts of the stories. You can do flashbacks. That's, for me, what would make the series perfect, is that we got both of them.
Yeah.
I did like Solo a lot more than a lot of people did, but I also thought that clearly Donald Glover was the best part of the movie. Like, it wasn't even close.
I liked Emilia Clarke too. I thought she did a great job as Kira, and I'm kind of sad that we're not doing anything more with that. And
Well, I have a whole theory on her, and that she destroys franchises because she did one movie as Sarah Connor, and then they're like, nope.
I loved that movie. I
thought that Terminator movie was better than quite a few of them, actually. I thought that one was actually pretty good.
I loved that Emilia Clarke. She played a much different Sarah Connor than what we've gotten. Even if we go to the Lena Headey version, like I just loved
which I really liked that TV series, by the way. Yeah,
it was good. But I just felt like Emilia Clarke, like she just brought this.
It was a different take on it. Yeah. And I did like her, but it's just something that you're just like, oh, you put her in a movie, and then all of a sudden it's a box office disappointment. Yeah, I mean, look, they set up Darth Maul in that, for God's sake, you know what I mean? Exactly. So it's just like what it could have been if people had responded better to it. But so I hope we get to see Childish Gambino as Lando.
I really did love him as Lando. I thought he did an excellent job. I will hold back other comments on a certain actor who played Han Solo and my thoughts there, because they are not the most positive.
Why are you disparaging Harrison Ford like that? I don't understand why. Yeah, well, look, here's what I'll say, is that he did grow on me throughout the course of the movie. Like, at first, I'm like, I mean, this guy couldn't be less Han Solo. And then the movie starts to work for me when he catches up with Chewie. And then it's like, oh, I'm just having fun. I'm going to not worry about it so much. But yeah, I mean, look, there's things that don't work about it. But I had a lot of fun with it. And to me, it was a lot more fun than, I mean, it's not a better movie than Rogue One, but it's more fun than Rogue One. You know, it's more fun for a rewatch, you know?
I understand what you're saying completely. And I actually, with Solo, I loved the storyline. Yeah. And I agree. It was a fun movie.
Bettany's great in it, by the way. You know, I mean, it's like all these things that you forget about it, you know?
Yeah. And just so I mean, like seeing like Voss, just, you know, I was a fan of the story points that they brought in, and that we got to see more of the universe. I even enjoyed seeing some of Han Solo's backstory. I do not like how he got his last name, though. I'm by myself. Han Solo. No. He should have never tried to explain that. He should have just been Han Solo. But I just want to mention two more projects here. Yeah. We have the Rogue Squadron movie. They have it announced as it will be released in Christmas of 2023. If memory serves, this was the movie that I think Deadline had announced maybe a year ago, back when Tross came out, like right after.
Oh yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
Be a female-centric, basically a group of women who are in their own Star Wars journey, and so I'm assuming this is the same one. What I found interesting is that Patty Jenkins, who directed Wonder Woman, her grandfather, she comes from a generation of starfighter pilots. So who else would be better than to direct a movie like this?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I agree with that. Yeah. And I mean, it's to get Patty Jenkins at a point where, you know, it's obviously one of the hotter directors out there right now to get, you know, I mean, I'm sure that Warner Brothers would have loved to have signed her up for another movie, and then, you know, not put it out in theaters so people could watch it on their phones or Apple Watches. But you know, so I think that not doing another Wonder Woman. You know, not signing up for Wonder Woman 1990. You know, I think it'll be. I think it'll be. It's a great time. Look, I bet she would do a third Wonder Woman movie, but I think it's great to just do something different. And what she's going to bring to Star Wars is going to be phenomenal. So yeah, I'm excited about that too. You know, it's not the number one thing that I'm like, oh my god, I can't wait for it. But I'm like, oh, this is going to be good.
Yeah. I can only imagine what she's going to do with this. I am expecting this to be another Rogue One, where it's just so unique that you just instantly, like, it just instantly is a classic. So
yeah,
I'm just very excited for that. I'm a huge fan of Taika Waititi. I love acting. I love his films. He's one of my favorites. The fact that he is directing a Star Wars film, I don't care what it is. It could be anything. Yeah. But the fact that he's directing it, I'm just like so fan.
Yeah, you said it could be anything. What if tomorrow the revelation is Jar Jar, a Star Wars story?
I will be there. Like, I want to see whatever he does.
I mean, Taika Waititi would do something really fun with a Jar Jar movie. I'm not saying that that's what's happening. I think that they're not crazy. They know that. But if anybody would make it in a way where I would go, you know what, that's probably interesting. All right, let's go see him interact with a bunch of Bombad Gungans for a little while, you know?
Yeah, I don't really think it would matter what he decides to write about. Like, they said he's in the process of writing it now. I don't think it matters. He could bring Jar Jar could be, I mean, I doubt this would, you know, like you said, I highly doubt that this will happen, but he could bring Jar Jar in and it would be a phenomenal movie because it's him and he's directing it and writing it.
And then there's a side of it where, you know, they could, you know, obviously it's not George anymore, so that's probably the difference, but you could sort of defiantly, like, own Jar Jar and be like, yeah, we get it, people don't like him, but you know what, he's an important part of this universe. So get ready for you know, Jar Jar, the Jar Jar the animated series, or Jar Jar the live studio audience Star Wars sitcom. You know, I would be all in for that.
Jar Jar's speech to the Senate on rerun, like, they just keep it on a loop. But anyway, I think we have mentioned all the projects coming up.
Let me just throw this in, because this is something that Michael B. What happened to Kylo's sister, or did they just not use her? So Kylo
used her. In Legends, it was completely different. The Skywalker, Luke Skywalker,
they were the twins.
Kids. Yeah, it was Jason and Jason and Jana. And and Jason's the one who went to the dark side. There was a Ben, but he wasn't, like, it's Jason who in the book, he's the one that ended up going, like, to the dark. And then I don't want to ruin it for anyone. If you guys haven't read the Legends books on that, you should.
And I know they had, like, young adult like Jedi twins stories. My mom read those, and I'm like I gotta draw the line somewhere. I can't.
I have one of the books. Hold on, let me grab it.
Oh my God, Rachel's gonna go get it. Well, and obviously, you know, earlier we were talking about if you are interested in getting some reactions to the Marvel stuff from earlier, you can find our show. Yeah, you know what? Oh, that's so funny. Anakin's Quest.
Yes.
Yeah. No, my mom had like 10 of those, and she may still have them. I don't even know. I did not read them, but yeah, I mean, look, there's but what I do have somewhere in this garage, I don't even know exactly where. I do love the Heir to the Empire books, and sort of, you know, that timeline with the character Mara Jade that we've never gotten, you know, the Emperor's Hand, and you know, all that. I mean, I would love for them to figure out a way to make that character canon.
They've been talking about that. Like, this is all rumors that I hear, but Mara Jade, who, for anyone who doesn't know, was not only Luke's love interest, but they were married and had kids. So, and the whole thing is that when I read the novelization of The Last Jedi, the prologue, I'm going to call it a prologue. I'm pretty sure that's how they, like, categorized it. The prologue is Luke Skywalker having a dream and he dreams about being with someone, and they don't really they make it sound like it's another woman who would have been on the farm with him, and that he's back
Right.
to Tatooine, and like the what if lifestyle if he had never gone on his hero's quest. But it's interesting to me that they would have that written in. Of course, it didn't make it into the movie, but it's interesting they would have that written into the book where he's dreaming.
Yeah,
about
that's pretty cool, actually. Yeah.
and I wonder, like, we don't know, like, that to me is, I know that people are trying to get away from Skywalkers. To me, that would be a very interesting, untapped area of what happened to Luke between episode 6 and episode 7. I would love to see how he changed. And I know that they have like Legends of Luke Skywalker. They have a couple of books, but I want to see it.
And yeah, no, I mean, I'd also like to know, like, what's the canon story, because we have, extended legend stuff.
Well,
but if they want to figure out how to do the Mara Jade character and not have her tied to Luke, I would still be interested in that. By the way, I still think that's an interesting. And if they ever did, like, sorry, I know we keep talking about each other. If they ever did do like like an anthology sort of show, just like different points in the Star Wars universe, sort of, not connected, a standalone Mara Jade episode would be kind of cool. I'm sorry, what were you saying, Rachel?
No, I was just saying, the Legend of Luke Skywalker, it is technically canon, but the problem is it's called Legends of Luke Skywalker for a reason. It's not like it's Legends of him. So like basically it's like tall tales. So like you don't really know what's true and what isn't. Or
right. It's like Billy the Kid or something. It's like the legends of somebody that probably got played up a little bit. That's interesting.
Yeah, and like exploring that idea of Luke as this Jedi legend / myth / whatever. Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot that we have to look forward to. A lot with the books. Did you have any like final thoughts before we wrap up?
Well, I know Rachel has a different answer for this. Guys in the chat, have you read the books? And I know that you're talking to the chat. Rachel's read a lot of the more recent books. The books I'm talking about, I read like 30 years ago. And I really liked there's a couple of trilogies and all the Dark Horse comics that tied in. I mean, in 1990 or 91, I forget what year we first got Heir to the Empire. I mean, the expectation was we were never going to get any more Star Wars anything ever again. So all of a sudden these books start and they were great. So I really liked them for that period of time that I kept reading them. It was probably a good 5-6 years where I stayed caught up with them. There's a lot of newer stuff that all sounds interesting, stuff that ties into the sequel trilogy. It's just finding the time. It's like, I bet I have the time to read comic books now and then, because I can devote 22 pages with a lot of pictures, but it's hard. I wish it weren't true, but I would love to, find time to read novels again.
So I've read a lot. I've read most of the canon books now. I've read some of the legends. I've read the more famous ones. I read some of the original Thrawn books before. Like now we have the canon Thrawn, but we got, Timothy Zahn. We had a lot of his books that were legends, that are considered legends now. I've read Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which is by Alan Dean Foster.
Yeah.
He's a huge sci-fi writer, and he's still around now, and he still writes Star Wars books.
And did he do the novelization for A New Hope?
He might have. The one that I know.
He might have done one of the other ones,
He did. The Force Awakens is the one that I know for a fact he wrote, because I know that he did that. Jason Fry did The Last Jedi, and then Rachel Carson did The Rise of Skywalker. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that Alan Dean Foster did do other episodes as well, though.
Yeah, he did do the novelization of the original Star Wars. Of course, it was called Star Wars, but the interesting thing is it was as George Lucas, so he didn't actually get the writing credit. It's one of those things that you found out after the fact.
Well,
that did that. Yeah.
The interesting thing about Splinters of the Mind Eye, which he wrote, is that it was supposed to be when George Lucas put out Star Wars. He wasn't sure how it was going to do. He wanted to do a sequel. So what he said to Alan was, listen, I want you to write a book. I don't want it to be something where it would take a lot of money to produce and actually create this as a film. So write a book so that we can then shoot it as a sequel, like a low budget sequel.
Yeah.
He was basing this on the fact that he didn't think Star Wars was going to do as well as it did, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
Then, of course, it blew up, and then we never got to see Splinters of the Mind Eye, which is probably for the better, because when you read it, yeah, Luke and Leia, yeah, they are definitely not brother-sister in that.
They're definitely not brother and sister. I do remember that.
There's some sexual chemistry there. So, yeah, but it's actually a really good story, and we get a story with the Kyber crystals.
Yeah, Dark Horse did a comic book adaptation of it. This is probably within the last like 15, 20 years. But yeah, and that was sort of like another one of those things where that was the extra Star Wars content. You know, it's like between A New Hope and an Empire Strikes Back, it was like you had a monthly Marvel title, which a lot of those stories can be discounted, especially because they had like a humanoid Jabba the Hutt that doesn't look anything like the Jabba the Hutt that we later got, you know. So there's a lot of it that probably doesn't work. But anyway, so I know we went off on the spiral on the books, but I'd love to read some of these books. I've had some very highly recommended books that tied into not just the sequel trilogies, you know, stuff that I think that there's some that deal with. I don't know. Does Jen Erso have a book? I thought
she does. She has a couple of
I thought I'd heard that. Yeah.
She has a couple of books, and that's what I was mentioning before with the fact that you get a lot more of her storyline. There's the novelization of Rogue One, but then there's also 2 other books that focus around that, around her life and around like what that time period and that story. They are really good. So, but Christian, I'm just throwing this out there. I know like Ryan and I back during the days of AfterBuzz, we were doing a book club for Ahsoka. So
nice.
Do a book club. Maybe we could talk about it on the air.
Oh my God, I would love to do a book club. But it might need to be a comic book club. But
I'm up for that.
Yeah, but because look, there are some great ongoing because there's the Dr. Aphra series, which I think is really interesting. The Bounty Hunter series is good. The regular standalone Star Wars series is good too, but there's also like a good Darth Vader series that's out, and there have been a few over the years.
Yeah, there's some really good ones, some really like interesting like backstories with Vader, especially, you know, some of them where we get like, you know, kind of going back to the Obi-Wan series. I'm wondering if they're going to pull some of what we got in the comics with Vader going, you know, the one issue where he ended up going and like he actually sees himself with Padme, but it's like a demented version.
Yeah.
They could do something like that in the show. So yeah, comics, they're full of like, you know, golden.
Yeah. And you know, it makes me think, by the way, could we get Keira Knightley on the on that show? You know, I mean, she was one of so it's just thinking out loud that it really opens up the possibilities. But yeah, I don't know, maybe 2021 will be a year where I can carve out more time for reading, because I would love to do that sort of a thing. But anyway, I know that before we start talking about the books, we're talking about all the shows. There's so much to be excited about. You know, there's the kid in me is excited about Lando. I think the Ahsoka show is going to be great. And just I don't know. I think that the Obi-Wan series is going to be even more epic than we thought. So if you're lightsaber to my head, I'm going to probably say that the Obi-Wan series is the one that, you know, if I can only watch one of these, that would be the one that I would really want to see what's happening, you know?
Ooh, I don't know if I can answer that.
That's hard. No, I know. It's fortunately we don't have to do that. We don't have to make the Sophie's choice.
Here's my thing though. If I'm just throwing this out there, but we know that Hayden and Rosario Dawson are friends.
Sure.
And so my thing is just throwing it out there. If Ahsoka means that she gets to have a Force Ghost conversation with Anakin where they hash everything out and they finally have closure after the way they ended in Rebels, I would pick Ahsoka over anything that we might get. And I know like Taika Waititi, like he is one of my favorite directors, but given what we could get in Ahsoka, I'd have to go with that.
It's hard to argue with that, but I'll stand by Obi-Wan. So
we could get something like that in Obi-Wan, maybe.
yeah, that's true. That's a great point.
Yeah. Well, all right. Christian, where can everyone find you?
Well, if you're watching on YouTube, that means you're watching on the Blackcast YouTube network, as it were. So subscribe, and you'll see videos for this show, Star Trek Discovery, and the aforementioned Marvel Movie Talk, where next Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, we'll have another conversation with legendary X-Men writer Chris Claremont, who has some really exciting things in the works for the next few months over at Marvel. And I have it on good authority. He has seen the New Mutants movie, but I don't know what he thought of it, so I can't wait. And anybody that's ever seen him interviewed, whether it's by me or anyone else, he will tell you what he really thought of it, whatever it is that he thought. And I'll just prepare people. He really liked the Dark Phoenix movie from like a year, or I guess that's 2 years ago now. I don't know. It all blurs together because of the pandemic. I think it was just a year and a half ago, but it feels like 50 years ago. So anyway, so yeah, you can find all that stuff there, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ.
Awesome. And yeah, Dark Phoenix was from 2019, which surprises me because it doesn't feel like it was, from that point. But you can find me on Twitter or Instagram. Twitter at Rachel Radner, Instagram at Rachel Radner author. You can also find me on Twitter at Rach Goodman, which is where I used to, post more of the like entertainment and AfterBuzz stuff, but now I just rant about things like Disney Investor Day and what we got. So if you want to go over there, you can catch me live screaming about the things we were getting and like, hearting things and just, being crazy. But otherwise, you can find my romance novels on Amazon under the pen name Rachel Radner. But yeah, thank you guys for all tuning in. We will see you for the final episode of season 2 next Friday, 9 p.m.
Thanks, everybody. And, may the force be with you, of course.
Yeah.